Welcome, everybody, to the KinesioOutdoors podcast, where my goal is to educate you on how to safely enjoy exercise indoors and outdoors, inspire you to experience life outside, and encourage you to live a more active life closer to nature. Today on the podcast, I have Josh Stevens. Thanks, Josh, for taking time out of your day to have this conversation with me. How are you?
Doing good, Stefan. How are you?
Living the dream. The weather in Oregon, and you're just, 40 minutes south of me, is it's Oregon weather, right? It's sunny and cloudy and rainy and sunny and hot and whatever. We're getting it all. So
So I'll break news to you live on your podcast. So I actually moved, so I don't live in Oregon anymore. But
okay.
yeah, I live out in Georgia now. So my wife took me out here for a job that she got, and I'm working remote from here. So it's been a totally new experience.
Oh, that's interesting because we used to see one of your wife's colleagues at church. You guys just went to a foreign country with them.
Oh, really? Yeah. So
Yeah.
her advisor, yeah, Dr. G.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So
Is it
we
the man or the woman?
the woman, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Bridget was saying it's the woman, and I was like, I don't know. That guy seems pretty quiet. Like he might be pretty sharp. So, Dr. G, where'd you guys go?
Yeah, so they're Polish, and so they
Okay.
go out there for the summers. And we had a trip planned to the UK, so we were
Hmm.
gonna be. We went to a concert out there. Was kind of the main reason for the trip, and we were planning to be out there for about 2 weeks. And then we decided, it's pretty cheap and easy to just pop over to mainland Europe. Let's just go check out Poland for about a week in the middle of our trip. So that was pretty cool. Um,
That's super cool. Yeah, and it's nice to have like kind of local or people who know the area and speak the language. That's really cool.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
incredible. Like, Dr. G's husband, Peter, I guess was born and raised in Warsaw, and then we met up with them in Warsaw, and they gave us like the locals tour and showed us everything, and it was really cool hearing the history. Like, so many things we never would have heard if
Yeah.
we hadn't had that level of like interaction. So it
Man,
was
that's
amazing.
super cool. Bridget was telling me I need to ask you. I need to off air because this is not what we were going to talk about. Ask you more. Bridget, yeah, we'll get into that off air, but that's
For
super
sure.
cool. And tell your wife congratulations. I assume she got, is it a postdoc or did she get a professor job?
She got her well, so she just finished her PhD, and then
Mm.
she's working as a consultant now in
Okay,
Atlanta.
that's
Yeah,
cool. Yeah, good for
yeah,
her.
that's her
Hopefully
PhD
Georgia
right
treats you
there.
well. Yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully Georgia treats you well. So, back to what we were trying to talk about initially.
For
Sorry,
sure.
everybody, for that tangent, but I never get to talk to Josh anymore. So kind of introduce you. Why don't you give everybody just a little taste of what your job is and how you worked towards that job? Maybe your history with archery, your history with hunting, things like that, and just kind of give everybody, a 5 to 10 minute if you want to take a little longer. Just kind of summary on who you are, how you got to where you're at, and yeah, what makes you who you are.
Yeah, no problem. So my job is I'm a design engineer at Bowtech Archery. And so what that means is that, I'm the guy behind the computer drawing up, pretty much every aspect of any new bow that might be offered. So that involves a lot of different things, design of all the different parts of the bow and how they all work together. And then as well, testing and, kind of validation and checking out every aspect of the product so that we make sure that it's safe and does everything that we want it to do for the customer. So pretty much that was kind of my dream job as a kid. So to get into that a little bit, I was introduced to archery in 2010, I believe. um, and so that was, not something that I had really had much exposure to. But one day my dad and I were just driving down the street in Clovis, and we saw Impact Archery sitting right there. And that was something my dad had done as a kid a little bit. And he said, "Hey, you want to go in there and shoot some arrows?" I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." So went in there and, like many people do, rent a recurve bow and fling some arrows, and just got totally hooked, as a lot of people do. If you've ever done archery, like well, it's just extremely addicting right off the bat. Like, whoa, like this is hard, but you instantly think of like, maybe if I did this different or that different, I could get better. And like, that's just super addicting, I think, for a lot of people. So, um, yeah, it was just off to the races, like worked my way through like a few different bows, in a short span of time. Cause, at the time I'm growing like a weed and, blowing through some youth bows and, at some point got really into like the target side of things. So, found a really cool community of target shooters there at Impact Archery. Got into some outdoor target shooting. Joined up as a member at Fresno Field Archers up in Dunlap, which
Mhm.
is an amazing range. If you're in the area, would definitely recommend it. Um, and yeah, just was loving it. That was like my main hobby. Would spend many days down at Impact Archery just slinging arrows, and yeah, so that was my intro to it. Around that time, realized that I probably kind of had the makings of an engineer. Was into all those subjects in school and like tinkering with stuff, and it was just like a natural marriage of the two when I realized like, oh, you can do all that on bows. Like that was like the coolest thing ever. So that's how the dream job was born, I guess, and everything after that was kind of in pursuit of that goal. So do you want me to just keep going, or
Yeah, if you want to go into details, because remind me which college you went to again?
I went to Cal Poly?
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. So yeah, if you want to talk about that, because there's no engineering of archery equipment in college. So I'd
Yeah,
be curious how you were able to leverage that to get that job, because I'm sure there's somebody out there who's like, "Oh, that's interesting," but what's the like that missing piece, if you don't mind going into that a little bit?
yeah, yep. So like I said, I went to Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, which is known to be pretty good engineering school in California, and so like you said, there's no bow design class in college, but my degree is in mechanical engineering. That's what most of the people in my line of work go through mechanical engineering program. And so there you get the fundamentals, machine design, mechanics of materials, dynamics, stuff like that. Um, but so I had a few kind of pretty formative experiences around the time I was looking at what college to go to and what to do, and one of which was, so I went to the Vegas shoot, big indoor archery tournament in Las Vegas, and through a couple of mutual connections was able to find one of the engineers at one of the big bow companies, and just kind of pick his brain for a little bit, which was really cool. He wanted to go watch the shoot off or probably do 100 other things, and he took the time out of his day to stand there and talk to 16-year-old me that just wanted to hear about what he did. So that was awesome, and kind of learned some of what I would need to do to get from where I was to where he was, or thereabouts. um, and so that was great. And then um, went into college, was just doing the college thing, still shooting my bow and all that. And at some point, I guess it was after my freshman year of college, kind of became shop helper at Impact. So they were, a little short staffed and they needed a couple extra hands. And by this time, I was pretty well versed from just tinkering on my own bow, using a bow press, twisting up strings and cables and doing all my own stuff. And so I was able to kind of slot in there and help and learn a lot. So that was awesome too. And then later on in college, ended up working for another bow shop in San Luis Obispo there. So always kind of getting that hands-on experience, and then it was great doing that at the same time that I was in college, learning these engineering fundamentals, and can kind of see how they work together. So that was amazing as well. And then kind of throughout college, I was always trying to just ping like bow companies, and just I was always like cold emailing anybody who I could kind of get a hold of, either just through their normal like email contact, or if I could find like the director of engineering's email, like just get in his inbox and say like, hey, this is who I am, this is what I do, I'd love to come intern for you or whatever. And usually they're not really into that, but got some good contacts through that and was able to chat back and forth, and actually kind of corresponded with one guy and just asked him like, okay, so I'm coming to the end of school. I've got some electives I need to take. What would you recommend being in the position that you're in? If I want to become you, what do I need to take? So how do I specialize in college and kind of go that route? And so he told me what he would take if I was looking to be a bow guy, and that's exactly what I took. So got into a composites class, a CNC machining class, um, and then for my fun one, I did a bike building class, which was probably one of the more valuable classes I did, because I got to design and build a product, and make something that worked in the real world, and that's the job. So
That's super cool. I didn't realize you put that much into it, although knowing you, I'm not surprised. Um, just the kind of guy you
Yeah,
are. You seem to like analytically tackle problems. And one thing I want to point out for those listening is it sounds like you use backwards design. So you're like, I want to be here. What are the steps to get there, knowing where I want to be? And it definitely didn't hurt that you were cold calling. Cold calling is intimidating. It's scary. I had to cold call to get my cold email to get into my PhD, and it's not fun. You get no replies, replies months later. So good for you for doing that, putting yourself out there. Um,
yeah,
it stings when you don't get responses, or when you get responses like, "Oh, that's cool. We're not interested." But you learn how to get better and things like that. So I didn't know all
yeah.
that went into it. That's pretty neat. Good for you.
Yeah, yeah, and
And
on the
go ahead.
note about cold email, yeah, so I always did that for internship stuff. Never quite worked out, but then I guess to finish that story, so to get my current job at Bowtech, so I went to the college career fair. I didn't really have a concrete plan of what I wanted to do if the bow thing didn't work out right away. But I was kind of resigned to the idea that like, I'll go and, see who's hiring, and whoever's hiring for mechanical engineering, I'll do that, and maybe long term I can try to figure out how to get into a bow company. So I went to that career fair and looked around, and I just like there was just no wind in my sails to go and talk to those people. Like, it's intimidating going up and just talking to somebody at a booth like that. And I felt like I hadn't tried enough to get into that bow company role to be at that point and going to talking to other companies. Felt like I hadn't quite given it the right shot. So I went and, did my round of cold emails for, hey, I'm about to graduate, are you hiring? Are you looking? And Bowtech was one of a few that got back. Some got back and said, hey, a lot of boat companies are very small, and a few of them said, hey, we don't really even hire people, sorry, but good luck. And then a couple, including Bowtech, said, you sound awesome, let's talk. And then they actually gave me kind of an internship trial period for a few months before I graduated. And then as soon as I graduated, they moved me up to Oregon, and I guess the rest is history. So
Yeah, that's awesome. And one thing, if you don't mind disclosing, what was kind of some highlights that you touched on in your cold emails? Was it your experience with archery, experience as a bow tech, experience shooting, the classes you took, your GPA? What are some highlights for those that are going to take the Josh Stevens playbook and use it themselves? What are some things that you
yeah,
felt that were helpful?
yeah, all of the above. I think the most important thing was probably that I had a concise but well worded email to really sincerely convey who I was and what I was looking for. That was probably the first thing, just be presentable. And then attached to my email was my resume and a portfolio of work that I had done.
Okay.
So by that time, I had done a lot of design work through a few internships in college, just side projects. Like I'm a big tinkerer. Like I said, I've always been into doing stuff like that. So I went to, this might be a can of worms, but I went to CART, if you're familiar with that, in
Yep.
Clovis,
Yep.
as part
Well,
of
you
my high
tell me
school
all about
program.
it.
Yeah, yeah. So I actually made a recurve bow for one of my projects there. So that was like one of the things that I stuck right in my portfolio. So anything that was relevant, not just to archery, but all my engineering experience, just slammed it into that portfolio. Because if they were interested, they could look through that whole thing, and if they weren't, then they could just read my email and kick it aside. So probably, I don't know. I probably bombarded them with a lot of stuff, but I guess it worked out.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure just knowing you that it was really high quality and very thorough, which if you're trying to be an archery or bow engineer, you know, showing that you can be very thorough, I'm sure is really helpful. So thanks for sharing that. Hopefully that'll help some people out. I know
Yeah.
that when I went through that, I made up a prompt email and I asked one of my peers in my master's program, hey, what do you think of this? And then he showed me his prompt email to send as a cold email, and we kind of went back and forth. So it sounds like you did it on your own. Good for you. It's not easy.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. It's a good point you make about, that thoroughness, and, you know, that cold email or cold call or whatever it is, like that's the first thing that somebody's going to see, and
Yep.
maybe it's the only thing that somebody's going to see. So,
Yep.
especially in engineering where it's so, such a detail-oriented world, like,
Mm-hmm.
any typos or, grammatical errors, like that's going to stick out. Your attention to detail is probably one of the most important skills in engineering. So, nothing is off limits, I guess, as far as how you can, kind of present yourself.
Yeah, again, I think that's great advice. So thanks for sharing that. Before we get into your hobbies, I want to take a little detour and mention how we met because I think it's so funny. And Bridget likes to tease me about it. So you and Bridget, my wife, went to high school together. And I think she was like soccer, badminton, hung out with swimmers. And you were not, right? You knew Lindsay McGuire from, you were in band and something else, weren't you? Or was it just
Let's
band?
see. That's a long time ago. Mostly banned through
Okay.
through the school, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you guys weren't really close. You knew of each other, right? Clovis High School's not too big. It's pretty big. And we moved up here in 2021. I think 2022 in the spring, you somehow found Bridget on Instagram or Facebook that she was up here, and you messaged her. Hey, I recently moved up here with my wife as well. Let me know if you guys want to get together. I'd like to just like extend the invitation to show you guys around and just welcome you guys to the area, which is super dang cool. So good for you. That's really awesome of you. That just shows the kind of person you are. She did not read it to me that way. So we're sitting there, and I think I was on the floor. She's on the couch, whatever. I was goofing around with arrows or something. I don't know. And she's like, hey, some guy from my high school just slid into my DMs. Like, oh, that's cool. So you want to tell me about it? She's like, no, no, I don't want to tell you about it. It's like, okay, so you don't want to tell me he slid into your DMs from high school. Interesting. And then, because she was done teasing me, then she told me.
Yeah.
And you had seen that we had done a couple local archery shoots. So you invited me to go tour Bowtech, which, again, super cool of you. You didn't know me from, anybody. You didn't know me from someone off the street. So again, that's just a testament to the kind of guy you are. And here we are now. We've shared hunting stories. We've shared that relationship with like Brian at Impact. It's pretty cool. But again, good for you for just like being a kind person, reaching out, trying to welcome someone because it is intimidating moving to a new area. You just did it again. So
True.
I just want to thank you publicly for doing
Yeah.
that. That was really nice of you.
Yeah, no worries. I know, I mean, we had probably been in the area for about a year, maybe by the time I saw that you guys had moved up. And it's funny that you say that because I had like the same but opposite like thing
Yeah.
on my side with my wife. Like, hey, I just saw this girl I kind of knew from high school is like, 40 minutes up the road. Like, figure, we could reach out and just see, if they want to be friends or whatever. Like, but didn't want to like, I super wanted to not be like weird about it. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah, and that's a
an
fine line,
interesting.
right? Because you don't want your wife to think you're like whatever, and
Yeah,
you don't want to offend Bridget or myself. So I think you
yeah,
walk that line perfectly fine. You're just very honest, very genuine, and just I think that's a funny story. So as much
yeah.
as we can, Bridget likes to tease people how I was so jealous. Well, I just
Oh
want to know, and then she
yeah.
didn't want to tell me, so then I started getting jealous. It was funny.
That's funny.
So, anyways, now that we've gone over that, outside of archery, do you have any other hobbies that just consume your thoughts from time to time?
Definitely not as much as archery, I would say. That's always been like kind of my main thing, I guess. I've been into just kind of like I've always been like a dabbler, I guess. Like it's
Hmm.
not often that I find like a hobby that I stick with like I have with archery. But like lately I've been into, reading, playing chess quite a bit, like around the time like the Queen's Gambit thing got really popular. I kind of got
Hmm.
sucked into chess, online chess. It's just so easy to like if you're bored, just like pop on and play a game of
Yeah,
chess. So
that's
got
cool.
like thousands of games of chess played in the last few years or something. But
That's pretty
let's see
neat.
what else. All the outdoor stuff, obviously, they all kind of go together. The hiking,
There we go.
camping,
That's what I was looking
fishing.
for.
Yeah, of course. Those are the big ones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And on that note, let's dive into what it's like working with the hunting industry because Bowtech is a target bow company, but also a hunting bow company, right? And
Yep.
a lot of people think I work for this bow company. I'm going to hunt 24/7 or whatever. Can you just give us an idea what it's like to work in the hunting industry? Is it all hunting all the time? Is it no hunting ever? Kind of what's it like? Just give us a general idea.
Yeah. So one thing that I expected getting into the industry was like I expected a lot more people to be just like total diehard, like hunters, target shooters, whatever they are. Like I expected everybody to just live and breathe it. And a lot of
Mhm.
people do, but you have like this, you have kind of the whole spectrum of people. Like some people that work in the industry, there a lot of people's jobs don't even directly deal with the product all that much or deal with the customers at all, really. So a lot of people are just kind of normal professionals that, come to work and do their job and go home, and maybe they don't even think about archery, and that's okay. And then you have the diehards. There's definitely a lot of them at Bowtech where every weekend or throughout the week people will come by and chat about work, and then it's like, so what are you doing this weekend? And everybody kind of has a beat on like who's going where, fishing for what, like scouting where. So um, there's definitely like a strong community at obviously at Bowtech, and I'm sure pretty much every outdoor company, of like those diehard people. So if that's what you're into, obviously it's a great place to work. But to your point, like it's not everybody is like that, and even you know my job is amazing, and it puts me right where I want to be in terms of the type of work that I want to do. But at the end of the day, it still is it's a 5 day a week commitment, and most of the time 40 hours. So that inherently poses its own challenges to getting out and hunting as much as you'd like to, obviously, and doing all the things that you might love to do if you had infinite time.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's also not like all hunting all the time.
Yeah, definitely. Um, and I like that you said it is a 9 to 5 job because so when you gave me the tour, some people like they're working, right? And they don't want to be distracted. You introduced me to a couple people, they're just like, oh, hi, how's it going? And then they're back to what they're focused on, which is great. And then you have the other people that are like, oh, so you hunt, trying to find out where I hunt. So there's definitely a lot of differences there. But would you say, and you may not have had a ton of jobs, but would you say that the sense of hunting and community is really a strong bond for the Bowtech kind of family? Or would you say it's not like, I don't know. To me, it just seems like that's kind of like a glue that everybody likes archery hunting in some sense, and in that way everybody in that building has some relationship. Would you agree with that statement, or are there still some people that are just like could care less, I'm here punching the clock?
Um, yeah, I would say for sure, like there's definitely like, that cohesiveness exists among, enough of the people that that does kind of define the culture, I would say. You always do have some people that, like I say, that's just not where their passions are. So they're not necessarily like, they're not the diehards. But I would say overall the culture makes it such that it's all about producing a high quality product, all about, getting outdoors. Even, even the people that work at Bowtech that aren't super into archery or hunting, the vast majority of them, I would say, are into some other kind of outdoor pursuit, and they're pretty passionate about it, whether that's golf or cycling or running. Like everybody's got something for the most part. So that, I think, even kind of ties into that. It's like it's not hunting or archery, but it's maybe adjacent, where it's all in that kind of
Mhm.
outdoors community. I'd say that's like a really big deal.
Yeah, super cool. Thanks for expanding on that. Again, outside looking in, I've been there, a handful of times. So it's cool to hear that
Yeah.
even if people aren't into archery and hunting, they still have some passion, right? And that's something that I think is really important. If anybody out there, if you have one thing that you're really passionate about, I think that's really cool. And I just want to encourage you to, if you're passionate about something, even if you can't make a career out of it, enjoy it, kind of dig into it. I like to be a nerd. Josh likes to be a nerd. Geek out on it a little bit. It's a lot of fun. So you mentioned that you also, go hunting and hiking. So, when did you get into hunting, and kind of give us the rundown of when it started and then how it's grown to where it's at today?
Yeah. Yeah. So as I mentioned, kind of the majority of how I got into archery was through target shooting. And so I was not really, I wasn't into hunting much when I got started. And most of that was just because, my parents didn't really have any background in hunting. I wasn't really the type of like independent kid that's just gonna like go hop in my truck and go figure it out on my own, for better or for worse. Like that just wasn't really my personality. So I always kind of wanted to go hunting, but had really no idea where to start in terms of finding a place to go and figuring out all the regulations and stuff. So did like a little bit of like dove hunting throughout like high school and college with my buddies when the opportunity arose, but got into bow hunting around the time that I moved to Oregon. Um, so I figured, about more, significantly more than half of what Bowtech does is in the hunting space. Like you said, we do some target stuff, but really our core focus is like that hunting customer. And I just figured like I can't really properly serve this customer if I've never been out, in the woods on a hunt, and you know, conceivably, if I haven't drawn back on an animal, I probably don't know what that person is looking for necessarily. And beyond that, I mean, it's not like I didn't want to get into hunting. I did, because it's fun and it's nice to get some meat on the table. So all those things kind of led me to really just dive in around the time I moved to Oregon.
Yeah, very cool. And kind of once you dove in, because as you mentioned, you introduced me, or maybe it was just his office. There are some very efficient hunters at Bowtech. Some of them
Yeah.
are very, very skilled. Did you have a mentor? Were you asking questions, or were you just, hey, I'm in Oregon. There's animals out there. I'm just gonna go for it. Kind of walk us through that.
Yeah. So the cool thing is there wasn't one mentor, there was like probably 10 or or a dozen
That's
of
good.
different people that I could pretty much just go and ask, like, if I'm trying to pick out broadheads, like, hey, what kind of broadhead do you use? Have you had good luck with that? Have you ever tried anything different? Like any like equipment question under the sun, any technique, or any, literally anything you'd ever want to know about bow hunting. Like, not just one person in the office knows that, but like, several people know that. And so, like you said, there are some people there that, um, they probably haven't filled every tag for the last, 25 years, but probably more than not. Like they're bringing in some meat pretty much every year, and some pretty impressive animals too. So that's amazing. Like, just having access to that level of knowledge, like, at your fingertips. Um, but to kind of expand on that a little bit more, in terms of a mentor, like, I guess it was a little different than what I expected. Like, I almost kind of expected, like, bow hunting company, I'm going to go there and somebody's going to probably take me under their wing and go show me their spot. Not that I wanted to
Mhm.
like get in on anyone's honey hole, but like I just expected more of a, like, hey everybody, like, let's go hunting this weekend kind of atmosphere. And I'm sure I could have found that if I'd have been willing to kind of go around and ask and kind of, network a little bit more. But it was a little bit more of like a, go try something this weekend and then come back to work and like try to download, like, with some people, like, hey, what did
Mhm.
I maybe do wrong, or what could I do better, or here's where I was, like, do you have any experience in that area? So more of like a guess and check kind of a thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and even that is really, really helpful. I would say that it's more helpful if somebody takes you to a spot that's good and they can show you what's good about it, things like that.
For sure.
But also being able to ask people that are really well versed is huge, because you could think one thing's happening and it could be something totally different with the same outcome, right? So that is something that is really kind of special there. Is there anybody specifically you want to thank for giving you just a ton of help? Because I know you did have some success recently. So is there
Yeah.
anybody specific that was like the main person you went to?
Yeah, so this guy Blaine Pierce, he's our quality technician, and I think he's probably the office that I showed you with all the pictures on the wall of all the
Yeah, I
stuff
think
that he's
so.
killed over the years.
Yeah.
He's the total guru, like hunting, fishing, you name it. Like, he works 4 10s, I believe, so he's out each Friday, and like pretty much, a bunch of Fridays I'll get a text from him, like, with just pictures of his cooler loaded with fish, or just whatever he's into that weekend. He's always like hitting me up. And yeah, so he's like, I mean, there's many people I could thank for good advice, but in terms of quantity, like, I would probably talk to that guy at least once a week about, like, different spots. And he's an Oregon guy, born and bred, so he's been there his
Mhm.
whole life. He's been up every road probably within 100-mile radius of where
Yeah,
he grew up. So
that's
he's
cool.
definitely like encyclopedic on that stuff.
Yeah, super, super cool. Well, I'm glad you got into hunting. It definitely adds some authenticity, and I feel like it adds some insight to your design when you're working on these bows. So I think it's really cool. Let's see. All right, so before we tell hunting stories, if you can answer, what's your favorite bow that's been released that you were a part of, and why? Like, what about it is your favorite? What maybe problems did you guys try to solve or things like that? I've
Hmm.
shot quite a few Bowtechs. Brian likes Bowtechs. I've gone down to the shop a few times just to check them out. I'm just curious from the, behind the scenes perspective, which one are you the most proud of or the most excited about and why?
Yeah, I'll give you two because I can't pick one. But
Nice.
so most recently, if anybody listening to this has been following kind of the news coming out of Bowtech, we just released a bow called the Honor, and so that's a special edition, limited edition, 25th anniversary kind of celebration type product. So we're making 250 units of that, and that was probably the most different project I've been a part of, just because we're using a new material that we haven't used before, and tying a lot of stuff together all at once, like a new coating, which is Cerakote. Not that Cerakote's new, but new for us, and some of the interesting things that go along with that. Titanium screws to make the bow as light as possible. So it's a 32-inch axle to axle flagship bow loaded with all the features at sub 3.7 pounds.
Wow.
So it shoots great too. I mean, it feels awesome. Like, it's not thumpy or anything that you might see usually with lighter weight bows like that. It's like a total premium experience at that lightweight. So definitely go check those guys out, if you're out there listening to this and you're interested. But then the other one I'll mention is the target bows that I designed a couple years back, the Reckoning Gen 2 platform. Um, so obviously building on a very solid platform that was the Reckoning originally, and kind of taking a play out of the original Reckoning's book. So the original Reckoning was where we kind of debuted our deadlock technology, which for anyone that doesn't know is how we accomplish you know perfect knock travel, perfect horizontal knock travel, by moving your cams to the left and right. So that was new on the Reckoning originally. And then when we went to do Reckoning Gen 2, we were thinking, what can we do? What can we introduce on this bow to make it even better? And so we loaded that bow with new features. So I did a design for a new grip called Grip Lock. I don't know if I probably showed you that while you were taking
I
your
think you did.
factory tour.
Yeah, I think you
So I'm really proud of that design. As a team, we came up with a cool way to adjust timing without putting your bow in a press. We call that time lock. So those things, along with a lot of other things, went into that bow as like new technology. And as part of that, a lot of some of the kind of development that went into that was very like hand in hand with our professional shooters. So that was kind of a unique experience as well. That was
Yeah,
definitely helpful.
that's super cool. And it's funny you mentioned that Reckoning Gen 2 because Bridget's uncle, Dave Doglione, he lives in Salinas. I don't know if you guys ever cross paths because he's kind of pretty
Mm-mm.
active in that area. He got the Gen 2 Reckoning. I want to say like Christmas. Does that sound about right? Could he have gotten it then?
It's been out since like Christmas time ish of 22, so it's been out for like a full year
Okay,
at
yeah.
least.
So then, yeah, that's the one he had. And I was sitting there. We were at her grandma's place. He's kicking me as he walks by. Hey, let's talk about my bow. I gotta tell you, man, he loves that bow. He is almost 70. He's got the shakes, and he's like, I cannot believe this bow at such a light draw weight is so fast that my sight tape is smaller. So when I have those high and low things, I'm not missing as high and low. He's a huge fan of that bow. I didn't realize that you were a part of. I'll have to tell him I know one of the engineers on his favorite bow because he's a Bowtech guy. He's got a
Nice.
line of them in his garage. Super super cool. Yeah, I didn't realize that, but I am impressed with that bow. The time lock is a pretty sweet feature that if you're a good enough shot, it makes all the difference, right? For average guys like me, I don't know about you, I'm not good enough to notice, like a quarter twist in a cable for my timing, but some people are, and that's really cool that you
Yeah.
guys are able to figure that out.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff is, sometimes when we're kind of pushing the envelope on stuff like that, there's stuff where we don't know how it's going to go over. We don't know, we know it's solid, a solid design because we've tested it and we know it works. But it's still a question of like, is somebody going to embrace this? Is somebody going to want to use this? Versus just taking it to their bow shop and going, here, you do it. But what you find when you release a product like that is that the gearheads and the guys that really get it and the guys that
Mhm.
have been around for a long time can really appreciate what we're doing there. So that's rewarding. Whether everybody ends up being an early adopter or not, it's very satisfying. Like making something that people that really know their stuff can look at and go, "Wow, like that's cool." That's really
Yeah,
cool.
exactly, right? And when you have the shop owners, the technicians taking less time to get a bow as in tune or more in tune, right? That's huge. So, yeah, I didn't realize you were
Yep.
a part of that. That's so cool. That's awesome. I'm like doing a little fanboy thing over here, but that's really cool. I like seeing cool like innovation like that. And on the innovation thing, not asking you for new product releases or anything, but is it challenging to try to every year? Because right now, every bow company is trying to come out with every year a new flagship or two. Is that really challenging and stressful for you guys? Do you guys feel like you have plans for multiple years out? If you can, just kind of disclose some of the stresses of that. Because as the consumer, we're like, oh, we just need a bow. But I also know a little bit of behind the scenes from talking to you. It's not that easy to just redesign a whole new platform or cam with a different limb, so on and so forth. So just give us an
Yeah.
idea, like some insight on how challenging it truly is for bow companies to come out with one or two flagships every year.
Yeah. No, it is definitely tough. And the hardest part of it is that it's every single year. Like, and like you kind of alluded to, we might have plans for a few years out. So theoretically, you can be working on stuff and kind of have stuff in the hopper. But really, largely, a lot of the development goes on, in that year leading up to the release. And so it always feels like you've got this kind of finish line, and you got to get a product to the finish line, in time to, release to the public right around the time that everybody else does, because that's, when the bows are sold and,
Mm-hmm.
when you make your money, and you have to do something to stand out from the pack. Not only do you have to stand out from the pack, but you have to be different enough from what you did last year that somebody that bought your bow last year is going to take a good look at your bow this year and go, oh, that's worth it because of X, Y, and Z. And we earnestly try and do that every year. It's not just cheap tricks. Sometimes a new look kind of sweeps the industry. Like there's been a lot of examples where, a company might not change their bow all that much from year to year, but it looks pretty cool. And so therefore people won't necessarily just say like, oh, I want that bow because it looks cool, but they might come up with some justification for it, but really when it
Yeah,
comes down to it, like they just like how it looks.
yeah,
So there's definitely an element of that. But yeah, does that kind of answer your question?
yeah. It definitely does. Because again, we got to be careful here. But
Yeah.
I just it's interesting to see the demand of us consumers and just the stress it must be on you guys, the engineers, the developers. I'm sure that's quite a bit to do. So consumers, they're doing their best. They're making the
Yeah.
best things that they can, and
Yeah.
just be patient. Good things take time.
Yeah, that's right. It is tough, and it can be hard from my chair because a lot of the feedback that I see on my work is right off the internet on some forum where some guy that took 30 seconds to just type out a comment that really doesn't know what he's talking about and didn't do the research to know why he's wrong will just spout off like, that's heavy, or that's dumb, like that's that, or that's too expensive, and it's like he has no idea what went into all of it.
Yeah,
So it can be really challenging, like to take those comments with a grain of salt. But if there can be some truth in some of that too, so you can't just ignore it all. You have to, take the truth where it is, and even if that's that guy's honest assessment of what he sees, well, that's the customer that we're selling to. So
yeah,
even if you don't think he's technically correct, he's the guy that may or may not buy your product. So always balancing what I see, and then of course we have more official channels of taking feedback from the marketplace,
yeah,
through Bowtech. But of course I'm a human and I like to look at social media comments and et cetera, et cetera. So it's
yeah. You're
interesting.
curious.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. My favorite comment that I hear, and some people I know who we both know like to say, "Oh yeah, they just put different cams on this other riser and called it a new bow." And I'm like, "Okay, but it still has to function together. You
Yeah,
can't just Frankenstein a bow together and then come up with a name, the Franken bow, and it's gonna work.
right.
There's a lot more to it than that." So,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm sure that's definitely frustrating for you. I feel for you guys. I know enough about engineering to know that for a system to work together, there has to be modifications made here and there. And yeah, I
yeah.
feel for you guys there.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes a bow, sometimes maybe a bow is heavily kind of platformed off of another bow. And sometimes people would, comment negatively about that, but I don't see that as necessarily a valid criticism. Like you look at some of the bows that we've produced in the last few years, and maybe they share a riser, but their cam is targeting a totally different customer. Maybe one's
Exactly.
super smooth or one's short draw. Like there's valid reasons to platform. And if you have a great riser, you might want to share that across several bows because then you're buying more of that riser or you're manufacturing more of that riser. So therefore it's cheaper to produce, more efficient. Like there's
Hmm.
a lot that goes on behind the scenes that I think people just don't even consider. And some
Yeah,
people do, some people know, but a lot of people it's like, oh, that bow looks like that other bow, I don't want it.
yeah, exactly. I'm with you there. All right, so a couple more things I want to touch on here. So the first one, since this is Kinesio Outdoors, I study kinesiology. I want you to tell us about like your general exercise regimen, just kind of generally what you do, and then after that, we're gonna get into your buck and your cow elk story. So
Yeah.
let's hear your exercise regimen. What does Josh Stevens, bow designer extraordinaire from Bowtech, do to stay in shape for hunting and just like general health?
Yeah. So lately I've been just focusing a lot more on running, just because I just moved. I haven't found a new gym to go lift weights or anything like that. So as of the last few weeks that I've been here, we moved to a really cool neighborhood where there's actually like a lake in the neighborhood. So it's like there's a trail that goes around that. So I've just been going out at my lunchtime and just taking a lap around that. So that's like 2 miles, and try to do that every day. So just trying to get kind of back into shape after being on vacation and then moving. So that's been
Yeah.
tough, but generally just do like a pretty balanced type of weightlifting routine. I was pretty faithful to that for a year, probably I don't know, probably a couple of years while I was in Oregon, and did kind of the bulk up thing for a while, and then kind of cut back and just kind of want to find like a middle ground where I'm not eating myself, like not stuffing myself every day to try to gain weight or lose weight or anything like that. Like just kind of find a good maintenance point. But as many compound lifts as I can kind of do safely, deadlifts, squats, bench press, and then some work with machines and stuff. I'm far from an expert lifter and I don't lift super heavy. I've got really long limbs, which as you know makes it kind of
Yeah.
challenging to lift super heavy stuff. But
Yeah, you're at a
that's
mechanical disadvantage.
yeah, for sure. And then I'm also just not like super strong, but I just like to, just get stronger. That's all that really matters, right? Is get
Yeah.
stronger and try not to hurt yourself. And definitely found like when I was most into weightlifting, like trudging around in the woods was a lot easier. So
Hmm.
for whatever that's
Yeah,
worth.
that's cool. So let me ask you this before we move on to the hunting stories. So for me, just as an example, my motivation and goals are just general health. I want to live a long time and I want to be able to hunt, fish, hike, backpack for a long time. What are your general goals? Because you have compound lifts. So I'm just curious how those align with your kind of general fitness goals or what it is that you're working towards.
Yeah. Yeah, so just in general, and you're much more in this world than I am, so I'm certainly no expert, but like just, wanting to get stronger, just kind of push my limit over time and improve over time. And then B, like you say, just general health is really like my motivation for, was my motivation for getting into exercise in general in the first place. And, trying to live as long as I can and just have some forethought in terms of living intentionally like that. And I know, weightlifting and lifting heavier over time does good things for bone density, bone
Mhm.
health, makes you less prone to injury,
Yep.
all that kind of stuff. So,
Well, cool. Yeah. Thanks for touching on that. And just some general advice, take it or leave it. You might want to add some flexibility in there. just just in general, that also is going to help with injury prevention and just
Yeah.
like general ability to move as you age. You're a year older than me, right? You're a grade above
I'm
Bridget.
no, I was Bridget's grade.
Oh, okay, so we're the same age.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've noticed with my kiddo getting off the ground, sometimes I'm like, "Whoa, my hip should not be that tight right now." So
Yeah.
just something to think about. It'll just help with kind of that longevity piece. 5 to 10 minutes of stretching post run, post workout. I stretch before bed. That's like a nice calming way for me to wind down. That would be something really beneficial. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's good advice. That's something I have not done that much of, so
Yeah, we can chat
and
about
paid
that
the
later.
price.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Finally, I want to get into some hunting stories. So you shot an elk in Oregon before I did, and you texted me about it, and I was so excited for you. I think I offered to butcher it for you or something like that, and you're like, no, 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 I got it, I got it.
It's already done. It's in the freezer.
Yeah, exactly. So why don't you go ahead and give us however long of a story of your cow elk and your buck, because that was a really good year for you.
Yeah, yeah, it was really the first year that I had any real big game success. So I guess to go back a little bit, like I mentioned, I had kind of gotten into bow hunting when I moved to Oregon, which was about 5 years ago from today. And my first couple seasons, like I mentioned, didn't really know what I was doing. Found some spots on Onyx, relatively close to town. Just go out there and carry my bow around, and had some opportunity. I actually, my first day deer hunting in my entire life, it was first light, opening day of the season, and like literally 15 minutes after sunrise, walk right up on a doe. As I'm like walking into where I wanted to get to, I'm probably 100 yards from there, and I just look over and I see this doe in the bush. I'm like, I guess this is happening now. Okay, pull out my rangefinder. Find, she's like 35 yards, and I'm like, all right, let's do this. Boom, and like I have no idea what happens. Like pandemonium ensues. She's gone. She's like, blowing out her nose, which at the time I had never heard in my life. I'm like, oh, maybe that's her like dying, right? So I'm all excited. And to this day, I don't really know exactly what happened, but just totally, totally whiffed, I guess. Like I probably hit a branch or something I wasn't even looking for. So
Yeah,
that was
sometimes
like,
people don't look through their peep sight. There's so many. You could
yeah,
have smoked your bow by gripping it. There's a
my
million.
broadheads were definitely not as well tuned as they should have been. Like it was all new to me. So, anyways, yeah, just kind of got off to a little bit of a rough start there. But then, um, I don't know. I think it was probably that same year I actually killed a couple of turkeys. So that was like my first bow hunting success. So that was cool. And that was all like really my motivation behind like getting into hunting for the most part is like I want meat, like I want to like eat, and I want it to be cheaper than buying meat in the store, and it's obviously way better than,
Oh,
way better for you than buying meat from the store. And
yeah.
so like with those goals in mind, I don't really, I have mad respect for the guys that go way out in Eastern Oregon and they backpack in 20 miles to go after, their bull elk, 7 point bull or whatever. Like you probably get into stuff like that. Like I've done a little bit of that kind of style hunting, but really like the way I set myself up is really like I just try to lower the barriers for me to get out in the woods as much as possible. So like the closer the spot I can find, the better. If I can go out in the middle of the week after work and still have a little bit of light to go, check my cameras or whatever, that's better. Like that's kind of my whole focus. And so I guess I've taken a really roundabout way to get to kind of where where this story was supposed to go. But
No, that's cool.
um,
I appreciate the background because something that highlights is everybody's goals are different, and whatever your goals are, that's cool. So me, I went to Montana last year, and I told Bridget I spent $1,200 on an elk and a deer tag. The first elk and deer that step in front of me when I am legally allowed to send an arrow, I'm going to send an arrow. And I did, and I filled both my tags. And
yeah,
my dad and
congrats.
brother were a little more picky with deer, and they didn't fill their deer tags. I had food. They did not have food. That's the
Yeah,
bottom line. So everybody's different. My dad has had such a long career. He's like, no, I'm not going to shoot a doe because I want something with antlers, and I'm not going to shoot a spike because I want big antlers. I'm not there yet. I'm with you, man. If it's
yeah,
food and it's close, I'm all for it.
yeah,
So yeah, I appreciate you giving that background. So sorry
yeah.
to cut you off, but please continue.
No, I mean, to go off that, I mean, that's definitely, like you say, everybody has their own reasons and they're all valid. Like, the guys that want to go and hunt for big horns, like, you know, I've been around a lot of hunters that talk about, oh, I saw this 340 bull across the way. He was like 500
Mhm.
yards out. I don't even know what a 340 bull is. I don't even know how the whole like grading system even
Scoring
works. Like,
system, yeah.
that's probably embarrassing to admit, but like I just don't even care. Like, I'm after food. Um, so yeah, similar. And those guys that are after those bulls, they probably have a freezer full of meat, so they're not that worried about it.
They
Obviously
might.
it'd be
Yeah,
nice to get a big elk, but if not, they're not going hungry. So it's
yeah.
definitely different. And I can see where you would get, you would trend towards that over time. But anyways, so like I said, that's always been kind of my motivation in hunting, and so that's kind of how I set myself up. So I found a spot, as feasibly close to home as I could really find. Um, did some work, clearing shooting lanes and stuff. Picked out a ground blind at the Bowtech Pro Shop and went out and put it out. And kind of tried to set myself up for success as best as I could sitting still. And of course, that was all based on a little bit of work that I had done ahead of time with cameras. So put out some
Mhm.
cameras, put out a little corn. For anybody that's worried about it, in Oregon, baiting, deer and elk is completely legal. So
Yeah.
I know it's kind of iffy. Like people have their own ethical opinions on it, but it is legal where we were at. So that was a way that I could get into hunting where, I don't have to learn to be a perfect elk caller. I don't
Mhm.
necessarily have to learn, exactly how to play the wind and interact with the animals in that way, which is all great. And I love learning that stuff. But, trying to find success in hunting, that wasn't my first approach, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So, I kind of got my setup dialed. And it was also a way that I could, like I said, I could run bait out after work in the middle of the week on a Wednesday or whatever, get pictures for a couple days, and kind of inform how I would hunt that weekend. So it was an approach that allowed me to put in the work more consistently, I guess, in terms of how I, hit the spot and, how I kind of, patterned out animals and stuff. It was just an approach that worked for me. And so, elk season rolled around, and I had consistent pictures on that camera, like pretty much every day. There were like several elk there. And then season started, and it just seemed to kind of dry up a little bit. Like I'd have a chance encounter where I'd maybe bump a cow out of my spot as I would go in
Mhm.
to check the cameras or whatever. And it was like probably the third weekend of season, and I was starting to get a little bit nervous, like, hey, this spot's been hot, like what's going on? And then, the like I say, like the third weekend, I'm just sitting there in the ground blind, and this elk just trots out, and it's like the most surreal experience. Like the first time
Mhm.
that happens to you, you're like, is this even real? And then you have to like compose yourself, of course. And so I did my best, and drew back, and she was 16 yards, and I just aimed where I was pretty sure the lungs were, and let her eat. And it was actually a weird experience because she didn't like take off in a dead sprint or anything like I was used to seeing on hunting shows or whatever. It was almost
Mhm.
like she didn't even know what happened, and she
Yeah.
just like walked around the corner and then walked behind some trees, and then she just kind of stood there. Like I could still see her from like just outside my blind. And so I just sat there and waited, and eventually you hear that like where she fell
Mhm.
over, and then I waited a little longer, and that was it. So
That's super cool. Yeah, so a couple things I want to touch on there. Definitely cool that you try to lean on things that are easier for you as a less experienced hunter, like checking the cameras, setting that corn, which again is legal in Oregon, and then having that blind. I think that was great. So whitetail hunters, and now that you're in Georgia, it's called like ambush hunting. So it's really cool that you're able to do that, and not a lot of people actually have success hunting elk that way. So pretty
yeah.
commendable that you were able to do that. Definitely cool to hear that story. And yeah, when I got the text, I was so excited for you. I was like trying to offer you all my butchering stuff, and you're like, "No, it's done,
Yeah,
man."
it is all done. It was a cool story actually. So, she fell and whatnot, and I start texting everybody that I know from work and stuff like, hey, guess what? Like I just killed an elk, because there were a lot of people that were kind of
Yeah.
invested in my success at that point. And so I texted my boss at the time, and he was out elk hunting. He had killed a cow the week prior, but he was still out looking for his deer basically, and hanging around camp and stuff. And I texted him, and he was like 2.5, 3 hours away. He was like, hey, do your best, but I'm coming. I'm gonna come find you, because he had been out to my spot. He knew where it was and stuff. He was
That's
like, I'm
cool.
gonna come help you. And so like he just dropped everything and came right out, helped me get it. By the time he got there, I had already had it quartered, and I
Hmm.
had the back straps off and all the neck meat. Like I was like most of the way done. I did gutless, so
Yep.
I didn't have to deal with the guts or anything. And then he helped me get the tenderloins out, which was really helpful because that was a little
Yeah,
tricky, obviously,
it is
doing
tricky, especially if
gutless.
you've never done it. It's
Yeah,
intimidating because there's some precarious organs and other systems there that you don't want to be poking with a knife. So that's really
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, for sure. And then yeah, we got it thrown in the back of my truck in a cooler and went to his house, and he helped me process it all that day. That was a very, very long day.
Yeah, I bet. Super cool though, and again, I was so happy to hear that for you. So that was September,
Hmm.
and then walk us through your deer hunt. How'd that go?
Yeah, so after I got my elk, I think I took the next weekend off because I was a little tired, and I had sitting on a large pile of meat. I was like, I don't need a deer like next weekend or whatever. So I think I did take a weekend off, and then if there was another weekend of season, I think I did hunt the last weekend of elk season, if that was like the fifth weekend or whatever it was.
Yeah,
And then went back for the late season. So that's, what is that, like late no
November.
mid November, is that right?
Hmm.
And so I went out for that opening day actually, and it was cold. I mean, cold for Oregon. There's going to be
Yeah.
people that listen to this that are probably like, that's not cold, but it was like, I don't know, it was like 21, 22 degrees
Hmm.
Fahrenheit, and Oregon cold kind of bites a little different sometimes, where it's like a little more humid and just really
Yeah,
sucks it out of you. So it was
it
like
does.
that kind of a morning. There's like ice on the leaves and everything, and I was not prepared for the cold, to say the least. I was a little underdressed for the weather, so I was cold in the blind, and you're sitting still, so you're not moving or anything. So just doing what I could to stay warm, and the danger with that is always like you might leave the spot and then you miss opportunities or whatever. So I was like probably about there, like I was about done battling my mind to like stay cold. um, I might have had another hour in me, and then I had kind of recently, like just before the late season, adjusted a little bit of how I kind of had my spot configured, different shooting lanes and stuff. And so I hear a little bit of a noise, and I look over kind of to the left of where I could reasonably shoot, and I just see these horns poke up. And I mean, he was nothing like super impressive. He was like a really respectable forky blacktail, but like pretty big for a forky, I would say.
Yeah, yeah,
And
definitely.
yeah, he came in to, munch corn or whatever I had put out, and he was like, just being really cautious, but he didn't seem like he was, I don't know, he didn't seem that worried about me, but just, being kind of like deer are, just weird. And I just gave him time, probably waited like, I don't know, 5 minutes for him to kind of work into where I could reasonably feel like I could shoot him really well.
Hmm.
Um, and so yeah, I mean, same thing. I was shooting off my knees because I didn't really like the chair that I had for around the time I killed my elk. So I kind of like popped up on my knees and executed a good shot. Um, One thing I noticed when I shot my elk is like, and this has always been true. Like I've always had a little bit of like a target panic issue, like even shooting just target shooting and stuff. And obviously that doesn't get any easier when you're drawing back on a live animal.
Yeah,
So that
definitely.
was one thing I noticed on my elk, is I had to really focus on like slowing down and like finding the right spot. But probably didn't do as well as I should have on the elk. Obviously, it all worked out, so that was very fortunate. But then on the deer, just like you know doubled down on that, like whatever that thought was in my mind, like, okay, slow it down, wait, like it's not time yet, it's not time yet, and then make a good shot. So that was cool. And he probably went, so I got double long pass through. He probably went 25, 30 yards and then just like flopped over in the brush. But in such a way that it was a little tricky to find him. So that was my first experience with tracking an animal, because from my elk story, she walked around the corner and flopped over right there. So that was, I didn't have to find a blood trail or anything. So that was all new to me for this deer. Um, so I mean, that was interesting, finding the blood drops, and then luckily he wasn't far, so it was pretty easy to find him.
Yeah, very cool. And again, I got a photo opening morning, and again, you had already handled it, but
Yeah.
super cool. I was super excited for you. Just a cool experience, and again, you weren't picky, right? The first elk that walked out that you had a chance at, you took the opportunity on the first legal elk. Same thing with the deer, just happened to be a forked horn buck. So my
Yep.
kind of guy. I definitely
Yeah.
am all for, if it's legal, I'm hungry. So
Yep.
pretty cool there. All right. Before we get off the podcast here, I would like you to let us know which bow you shoot and then just your whole bow setup top to bottom. Because when you work for Bowtech, you kind of are able to choose your favorite, shoot them all, whichever one works your best. Let us know your draw length, draw weight, and then tell us your bow setup top to bottom, and then we'll get out of here.
Yep. Yep. So draw length, I shoot like between 30.5 and 31 inches. Kind of depends on the bow. Obviously, not all bows pull exactly the same, and you got string angle to worry about, but somewhere around there. I shoot. It depends because I've got a few different bows set up. So I have a target bow that's like 58, 60-ish pounds, and then my hunting bow is. It's a little light, but it's like 67, 68 pounds.
Yeah.
So it's kind of custom, so it's not like a so for my target bow, obviously I shoot a Reckoning Gen 2 39,
Mhm.
and then my hunting bow is, I probably shouldn't say exactly what it is, but it's it's similar to the Bowtech Core series bows. It's got some inspiration thrown in from other stuff, but it's a little bit of a Franken bow.
Nice.
Yeah,
Very
so
cool.
it's
And
been
then
pretty cool.
go over sight, rest, arrows, broadhead, vanes for us.
Yep. Yeah, so I pretty much shoot we're part of the larger pure archery group, Bowtech is. So we're co-owned, or we're the same company with Montana Black Gold, Ripcord, Tight
Hmm.
Spot. So I'm shooting all of those guys. Not all the stuff is the latest and greatest, just because I don't always just go and grab new stuff or buy new stuff or whatever. So um, I don't even know the names of most of the stuff, honestly, but I'm shooting like a Ripcord Max, I believe, still. Tight Spot. It's a 5 arrow, whatever their standard 5 arrow
Yeah.
is. And then the sight is it's a single pin mover. And again, I don't know all the specific names because I don't work on those
No
products, but
worries. That.
yeah.
Yeah, that's good enough. And
Yep.
then what's your arrow, broadhead, and vanes looking
Yep.
like?
So arrows I shoot Easton Axis 5 mils.
Hmm.
I like the AE Max vanes. I feel like those kind of stabilize things as well as anything I've found. I don't really
Hmm.
like blazers that much.
Yeah.
And then broadheads, I've tried a bunch of different stuff. I've tried a lot of different broadheads, but really what I come back to is I guess technically they're called Whack'ems. We had
Yep.
like a special makeup of Whack'ems that was done under some of our brands at some point, so I have some of those. Those I've had the best success with. And then I've tried Rage broadheads and a couple others, but I like the Whack'ems a lot. Just a
Yeah. Very
simple
cool.
fixed blade with replaceable razor blades.
Yeah.
It just
And that's
works.
a 3 blade, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Josh. Do you have an Instagram or a Facebook that you want to leave so people can follow you along? If not, don't worry about it.
Nah, I just have my own thing, so no worries.
Perfect. Yeah, not everybody's doing the social media thing. So again, everybody, Josh worked his way up, had a goal, went for it, works at Bowtech. I appreciate having you on here, Josh. And just everybody, have a great rest of your day. Remember, you need to start moving and keep moving for the rest of your life. We'll catch you on the next podcast.